Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Congratulations on making it to the Julius stage. We like to think of this as the thinking media person's stage. So hopefully you'll enjoy the sessions that we've got coming up. Just a little bit of housekeeping before we kick off. We are obviously, this is the Julius stage, so you obviously know where you are. Next door is Caesar. The awards will be presented next door that way. So hopefully you know where you are. Don't forget to, if you haven't already, download the app. That's the best way of keeping up to date with what is going on. The agenda is subject to change. The Wi-Fi, if you haven't sussed out the Wi-Fi, it's free complimentary Wi-Fi. The passcode is 10 years, all capital letters. Don't forget that. So, welcome to day one on the Julius stage. We've got a really exciting agenda for today. The first session is how brands, agencies, and startups can work better together. So a fascinating topic. Very much looking forward to what the panel have to say. And let me introduce the chair of the panel, Mr. Michael Bayler. Michael is a strategist and author specializing in marketing transformation. He has advised many of the world's leading brands and tech companies, and also media stars such as Robbie Williams and Simon Cowell. Michael, over to you.
Thank you very much, mate. Morning, everybody. Have I got a good sound? Everyone can hear me at the back? Good. Okay, so I'm going to invite my illustrious panel to come up and join me right away, and then I'll do a quick introduction. So, sound all right? Sounds a bit echoey. That could be good if we were a band, but we're a person. So, in this order, and we need to be in our right seats, panelists, Doran Tal, country manager from 18 Hubs. Please give him a round of applause. Come on. Emily Forbes, founder of Seenit. Come on up. This is actually a thinly veiled religious thing, but we'll get to that in a minute. Christina Richardson, co-founder of Openr. And last, and entirely not least, Rose Lewis, who many of you will know, the co-founder of Collider. Right, so before we get into it with the panel, let's just outline the thing that we're going to be talking about today. The relationship between startups, largely technology startups, brands, typically large brands, and the agencies that sit in the middle of them is both critical going forward and extremely vexed. It has to happen. Innovation is the major agenda for everyone on the demand side of the market, and business development and, frankly, survival is absolutely critical for people on the startup side. At the moment, there's lots of happy stuff going on, lots of people making quite good money introducing agencies and brands to startups, and lots of energy going on all sides. But the general consensus, certainly if you sit where I do, is that it's not quite firing. So before we get into best practice, there are a few things that need to be fixed. And today we'll be discussing about what those issues are, how they might be fixed, and what the way forward is for an overall program of activity that surely, in many ways, will define the future of marketing, and also particularly the future of the interface between marketing and technology. So, I'm now going to sit down. There's a seat with my name on it here. That's very good.
You're in the right place.
I am. So, Rose, you have assumed the position really in the last 5 years or so of quite a high-profile Mother Superior, blessing all these things as they go past you. What are you seeing? Does my slightly challenging point resonate with you at all? What are you seeing in terms of how well this is happening from your unique point of view?
So we're 4 years old. We've been investing in startups since 2013. One of the reasons why we set up in the first place is try and collaborate or collide large with small, and to give the larger agencies and brands we work with a framework to work with startups. But it does take time. We are seeing some results, definitely, but your challenges are well made, and there's a lot more work to do.
Yeah, indeed. And do you have a sense of where the collision points maybe, not in a good way, I mean?
Yes, I think what the first and foremost is that startups and large companies are two very, very different beasts. They have completely different objectives. They've got completely different timeframes. One is completely unproven, the other is proven. And in the case of very large companies, because it's proven, they do the same things time and time again. They don't always change, and they're not always looking for innovation. And so that's where the collision is sometimes more challenging.
So there's a culture clash, but there's also a collision of agendas.
Yes.
I would suggest really, and one of the things we were talking about before the session, and I'm going to ask Doran to pick up on this, is that brands, particularly, and brands are the people with the money in the end. Agencies may well be facilitating, but it's the brands that are coughing up the money. I think the gap between what each player is looking for in the relationship is absolutely significant, and I'm sure most of us would agree that closing that gap and aligning those agendas more efficiently is going to be a big part of the way forward. Doran, you've been looking at this space from the middle of one of the biggest media agencies in the world, but also from a position where literally, when you, as we were saying earlier on, when you walk down the street, you get to meet startups. What's going well and what's not going so well from your point of view, sitting between media and new technology?
So what I do as a scouter for Havas, I try to find best technologies and startups. I'm placed in Tel Aviv, so in Israel, and implement them into the daily work of the agency with clients. And I find that the real challenge is not finding, is not scouting. Because as you said, you walk in Tel Aviv, in every street you walk along, you just pick them. So the challenge is not finding the right technologies or the right startups. The real challenge is implementing, which is really difficult because first, we have to go through the barrier of our inner cycle, convincing our colleagues in the agency to give a try, to give a chance to those startups that we scout. And once we did that, the second cycle is going to taking it to the clients, to brands, and convincing them that we have a chance of doing something which is not only one-timer, something that can be significant in terms of strategy for the long term. Of course, we have to find the right startups that fit this need, but the challenge is double. We have to go through our own barrier and then take it out to the client.
And talking of your own barrier, presumably, as we were discussing earlier again, most of the startups, your filter that you apply to the market tends to focus on startups that can enable and move media forward. So that means a lot of the people you're looking at will be programmatically geared. 8 times out of 10, 9 times out of 10, that will be your focus at this point?
So if you're asking about my focus in scouting, I try to focus on not only on media, on classic media solutions like programmatic, RTB, but also to look for creative solutions, technological solutions that will help agencies do their creative better, faster, scalable, stuff like that. So I try to look on a various kind of technologies.
And what you said there is very useful because it puts me in mind of the eternal problem: what problem are we actually solving, and for whom, and why should they care about it? And we've got 2 ladies from 2 very interesting and increasingly successful startups. So I'm going to ask Christina and then Emily just to give us a quick explanation of what they're doing. But also particularly, I'd like to start from the problem that you recognized in the starting of the business and how you set about solving that problem. Okay. Christina.
So we had the problem that we started fixing. So we were running a startup business. We ran it for 3 years. We exited it last year. But with that business, it was a scrappy startup. We were using content, sharing it all over the place, getting great engagement in that content, but we're seeing no commercial result from that. So we built a tool to do that. So what Openr does is allows you to position your own advert or message on all the content that you share. It's like an ad unit for social and content marketers. So teams like Vodafone, Activia, Expedia utilize it to engage those who are already engaged in their content, to get it closer to a commercial result.
And give us a flavour. And give us a flavour of your solution, if you would, because it sounds fascinating.
So as an example, Samsung are using it in a moment to share phone reviews of their latest phone range, and they're overlaying a message that sort of draws people back to their website to actually find out more about the phone. So it's delivering that much more commercial message that you want to from content marketing, which has been challenging.
So would we say, in fact, that given that I think one of the established strategic problems we face in media right now is the traditional value exchange in advertising is rather broken by digital, that you're actually reintroducing some quite interesting nuances and layers of value to at least three of the stakeholders there?
Yeah, it's a really interesting play when you start talking about advertising, because we're tentatively talking about putting the human touch back into advertising. So you are choosing what message to write with each piece of content that you share. So there is a human who is thinking, right, this message with this call to action on this article, I'm sharing that. Somebody's doing that already. They're choosing what to tweet. So why not put a message overlay with it that works in that way? So, you know, it's almost like the anti-programmatic era, but I get a bit scared when I start thinking like that.
Extremely glad to hear it. About time we had a bit of anti-programmatic. So dropping into your actual experience, in terms of the commercial experience over the last, 18 months to 2 years since you crystallized the proposition, what has gone really well, and where have the frictions and frustrations emerged for you?
So I think there's two friction areas. One is the culture, the speed. 6 weeks for us is like 6 months or 6 years for the rest of the world. And, you know, we live or die by every week that goes by. And that's just the reality of running a young, high-growth business. But when it goes really well, it is usually because pretty much from the start, you've got the agency person, the brand person, and the startup around the table at the same time, thinking creatively about how the tools can be used, and then implementing it to the core. And you see pockets of excellence emerging, but there's lots and lots and lots of what I call show and tell, or beauty parades, where agencies would invite 20 startups in to present, and it's actually, as the startup, you are there just to show the agency or the brand what new stuff, shiny stuff is out there, and we don't have time for that.
You're the entertainment.
We are the entertainment. However, there is
The free
some great
entertainment,
examples.
that's true.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, so two issues emerging really from what Doran said and what you said. One is establishing precisely what problem we're solving and how we're solving it, and secondly, the extreme difference in clock speed from startup time and corporate time.
And that comes down to understanding. At the end of the day, it's our job to understand the challenge of our customer, be it the agency, brand, or the combination of the two, and to make our proposition as clear-cut and flexible to the needs of the customer. But it's difficult to take away just the timing challenges.
It seems to be generic and endemic. Doran.
Regarding this issue, I see my role as an agency. Part of my role is helping startups that I meet, helping them craft their solution or craft their offer that in a way that will fit the real needs of the client. Because I see 99% of the startups I see have amazing technology that no one needs. So one of our roles is to help them craft it in a way and do it in a way that will help real needs, it will answer real needs of clients and brands.
Ironically, there is actually in the technology culture a sort of suspicion and cynicism of classic marketing, is there not? So when you start talking about brand, you start talking about go-to-market and positioning, I think quite often in tech, the marketing piece gets mistaken for the brochure or something like that, when in fact it's far more crucial to success. Emily.
Yes.
Stop drinking.
Sorry, I'm so thirsty.
Give us a snapshot of Seenit, and then again, give us a run through some of the experiences you've had, both good and not so good, over the last couple of years.
Sure, yeah. So I founded Seenit about nearly 2.5 years ago now, which kind of feels nuts. And what we do is we help companies to change the way that they create video, so produce much more engaging and authentic and trustworthy video at scale. How we do this is we help companies to activate their own communities of their own employees, their own customers, their own fans, so the people who are the most passionate and the most knowledgeable about the brand itself, to capture the content and become the content creators and the filmmakers. So it's all captured on mobile, and it can be directed and then collected by the brand and very easily edited online and shared out to social. So, yeah. And the second part, so the challenges.
Well, actually, let me stop you on that one point. As Doran, I think we all agree, one of the major problems from the startup side is a lack of identification of a client problem that's being solved, and also a difficulty, perhaps even a cultural difficulty, in actually articulating that in positioning and offer. Because for us today, given that content marketing, which I think all of us are probably slightly sick of hearing about now, but given that content marketing is front and center in so many people's mind, it must be a lot easier today for you to get that message across, in that you can say, would you know this, will we do that? Whereas perhaps in the earlier days, there was a little bit of a struggle in terms of actually articulating the solution, where your solution actually lived in the brand building world.
Yeah, I mean, I think it is getting there, it is getting better, but I think it's still a bit of a struggle in terms of where we sit producing the type of video that we do. But it is getting a lot better. I think that people are opening up to taking a risk, failure. So if it doesn't work out, celebrating failure, it's not a bad thing to go by. It means that you are pushing that barrier. And so we have had a lot more kind of work come in, more departments within companies, more teams within agencies take a risk and actually start trying to kind of get something going with us. I think then the challenge is, how does that integrate, how does it scale, and how does it keep getting picked up throughout the organization, not just around that campaign where it was kind of cool.
I think the risk point is really interesting. So we talk about risk, and so I'm an ex-client side marketer, used to work for Nestle. Risk is talked about a lot. You use that word and immediately you can see people recoil. And it's really worth remembering that this is not catastrophic, multi-billion-pound campaigns we're talking about. It's just it's so easy, so accessible to be able to pilot small sections of one campaign and then scale from that. It is not some big unwieldy thing that we can't get our head around.
But in large organisations,
absolutely,
they're not set up for failure.
You have to understand that for agencies or big brands, this means taking risks.
But it comes down to a mindset.
If they recommended something wrong.
Which is why it comes down to a mindset. Yeah. It has to be accepted and recognised that working together around the table, client, agency and startup, you were in it together. There is no agency about to be fired because one small bit of a small campaign didn't go right.
I'm not sure how this can really work in the agency world, but I do agree that agencies need to learn to take more risks. And this ability can be caught from integrating with startups.
Absolutely. I mean, I was talking to one head in the UK who runs an innovation program within an agency. He was talking about the fact that they had one startup. The first campaign they did not go well, but they didn't just sack off that startup. They did another and another and another, and it's that mindset shift that's really critical.
Something actually as well on that, the celebrating failure and risk, but also an error I made at the beginning is not working out what success looks like. So that's a massive miscommunication with a startup where we were like epic, we nailed it, went really well, and the startup's like, well, normally when we do a campaign like that or a call out like that, we get X. But it's because we didn't explain how the product works in comparison to how else we're running projects, that actually that was success.
And would you say there's actually an obsession with metrics and with a corresponding vagueness about actual value? And that's become a bit of an obsession of mine, is that in a sense what you guys are doing is redefining value. And because value, whatever that means on the client side, and also the metrics that are associated with it don't necessarily mesh with that. So there's so another lesson here is a very, very early, clear and quite sort of flinty conversation about what actually is value, and then from that, what is success? Because I think it's too easy to jump to success without actually looking at the change in the way in the way to value. And I want to go to Rose now and say, in your experience, what does a successful engagement, and it'd probably be a program of engagement really, not necessarily between one startup and one brand, but in terms of taking a startup into the market and actually getting them exposed and getting some traction with them. What does that look like and what does it feel like to you? Because you've been sitting in the middle of that for some time.
So I'll use Unilever as an example, only because we've worked with them for a long time. When we started working with Unilever, this is even before the Foundry got invented. They were trying to figure out, they thought startups were the future. And Keith Weed tells a great story about one of the reasons why they were embracing early stage technologies is because actually they didn't go onto Facebook until about 2009. Coca-Cola went on there on day one and got 20 million followers for free. Unilever didn't, because they didn't embrace new technologies early enough, and it probably cost them 20 million to get their 20 million. And so the idea was they felt that they should start working with startups. But again, what does success look like? So they worked with us on our first program. They worked with one startup out of 9. But again, rather than them saying, okay, well, that was a load of rubbish, let's bin Collider, they came back and said, well, what didn't work, what did work? And then they started looking at different successful metrics. So trials is obviously a metric for them, but it was also people's changing of behavior, trying to do smaller trials because that would help them embrace failure, embrace what success would look like, and then setting the metrics, not just for the actual trials, but actually metrics for the individual people within Unilever to help them understand that actually working with technologies was going to be a good thing. So we try and work with each brand in a different way, but it's really around trying to set realistic expectations of what working with startups looks like.
And in many ways, it's about getting beyond the fizzy stuff, isn't it? And getting to business and marketing results as early as possible in the conversation.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think quite often some of the programs of the sort of little jollies that get put together between brands, agencies and startups, there's too much latte innovation there really, and not really enough focus on. And this really brings me to a point which I feel I have to make right now, is that from my point of view, I'm not here to talk about, we're not here to talk about me, but from my point of view, in running transformation programs for very large brands for about 10 or 15 years now, the impression of a sort of insider-outsider is that, broadly speaking, hardly any benefit is being achieved for startups, broadly speaking, in terms of the amount of activity. And I don't see any significant changes beyond the occasional fag end of a bit of campaign budget. I don't actually see any significant changes in the way brands are thinking about how they build themselves, sustain themselves, grow and compete in what increasingly we're talking about as the post-digital age. And for me, those are the metrics of success here, is that the startup gets to engage and grow its business in partnership with brand and agency, but most importantly, brands and agencies actually adjust accordingly the way they focus on building brands, building preference, developing consumer relations. And I am not seeing that happening 99% of the time.
Well, I think maybe we're in a privileged position because we have worked with some brands, and I do think that they are and it does take time. I think quite often, particularly startups, are working at such a pace. They want change tomorrow, and change is going to take time. So Unilever, for example, they worked with one startup the first year. The next year, they worked with 5 of our startups, Emily included.
But what happened to the original startup?
The original startup, they're still working with that startup.
Good.
And that startup is now working with about 20 other brands, and actually. So it was a great case study as they started with that. So I think there is pockets where it is working, but again, there's a lot to do.
So is this a model that will work when we get it right? Sorry, Don, I'll get you in a second. Is this a model that will work, or is this a model that needs radical change? Is it just a matter of time?
So I think the question of success is one of the biggest problems of the stage we're in now, because how do you evaluate success? For each part of the partners of this equation, the success is something else. For the startup who succeeded doing a pilot with Coca-Cola, the success is the actual pilot. For Coca-Cola's innovation stuff, the success is by, we did another, piloted another new technology.
Startup, yeah.
For the agency, success is for the client manager not getting mad phone calls in the middle of the night. This is a great success. So, and this is the problem. Success, for the way I see it, should be for everyone only one thing. Have we succeeded doing something that will have impact on the long term? Not just a pilot, not just a one-timer.
Yeah.
A long-term activity.
And can I suggest, Ron, that we also need to look closely at what helping the brand in the long term means? Because there's many, many ways of, one of the things we know about digital is it's causing a commoditization effect amongst a lot of FMCG brands. So yes, driving transactions, yes, driving eyeballs, but also building brand equity. Because a lot of those big brand clients, the Unilevers, P&Gs, Cokes and so on, they're in what I call yellow label hell in the supermarket, where their purchasing is increasingly being driven by price and equity is being crushed out of them. Now, these guys exist to build brands, not to make products. So for me, that's something that is ignored very often in the digital transformation conversation, is how does this build my brand, rather than this, how does this give me a slightly different way of doing advertising that perhaps isn't working that well anyway. Emily, how do you see, culturally, because you're working in an area that in many ways is quite soft, it's quite creatively quite soft. Do you bump up against the sort of rather dull, kind of ROI-based, hard ROI-based conversations with clients or with agencies, and do you have to push beyond that sometimes to actually demonstrate, la différence?
Yeah, I think definitely. If you're working in video and you're working and you're not involved in distribution, you're not involved in where the video goes necessarily, you can advise and you can talk to them about it, but at the end of the day, we do the bit of direct collect, we create. And so it is really hard for us. If it is then put on YouTube at 3:20 in the afternoon and doesn't go viral, it is very hard for us to then kind of, explain where it went wrong, and actually it was on the distribution side and placement. So yeah, we definitely get kind of pushback on it. But that's where working with agencies can be so helpful, because they know the full end-to-end, the cycle and where it fits. So if we work direct with the band, actually sometimes that can be missing. So that's a massive benefit for us working with the agency to make sure the full end cycle is complete. But we do also work a lot internally as well. So with large companies internally activating all of their employees to create and communicate much more efficiently. And then that value is on impact, feedback, so it's a different metric to track.
Christina, what's the one thing that you'd like to see change in terms of this dynamic in the next, say, 6 months to a year? What's the thing that you sort of dream of getting past that point to this different space? Is there something in particular that you'd like to see?
So I think in the immediate term, there has to be an understanding around feedback. So, and this is not new news, this is talked about quite a lot, that startups are often left in a vacuum. It is, we go in, we pitch, we have conversations, and then don't get any feedback. And actually, getting feedback, even if it's one line of exactly why or where we are, because it might not even be a no, it's just a not right now. It can have a really impactful, it can be very impactful on us as how we position ourselves and in just our time. Okay, so it's not right now, I won't keep on trying to phone you every 2 weeks then. Big impact. Long term, it's all about mindset. I'll go back to that point. The more that we work together as partners and we go into things saying, right, let's try this together, but that's a long-term thing.
Rose, back to you. You've seen some success models. You've probably stood alongside all the players while probably quite a number of promising, but in the end frustrating initiatives have either fallen by the wayside or gone into the freezer. What would you like to see shift in the next 6 months to a year in terms of this program of activity?
So I suppose it would be a call out to all the very senior CEOs to put innovation, whatever you call that word, right at the heart of everything. Innovation, and then therefore startup activity is often, someone with an innovation head in a lab somewhere, which means actually the capabilities of the startups have never been able to actually have the impact on the strategic level.
Doesn't it need more? We've seen Keith give it a major oomph with Foundry and so on. Obviously, that's had some effect in Unilever. And of course, there are sort of equivalent projects. Maybe a bit less focused, actually, in some of the other global brand owners. But I've seen it as a transformation person. I've seen that innovation is sometimes used as an excuse to actually change nothing significant.
Yes.
And since we're in Rome, I may as well chuck the phrase out there that many people are fiddling when in fact they should be burning Rome.
Yes.
There's a lot
You
of
wanted
sort
to
of,
get that line,
there's a lot.
didn't
I did, and you teed it up for me. Thank you. And I'm glad you pointed that out to the audience.
But that senior buy-in means that actually it gives, so Keith has given the permission, if you want to call it that, to all the brand marketeers to say, look, do engage with startups, do trials. I'm giving you permission to fail if it doesn't always work. Now, it's going to take time because Unilever as an organisation is going to take time to change. But with his blessing, it sounds a bit wanky, but you know what I mean. It's about him saying, right, this is what you should be doing. And too many senior people, large CEOs, don't encourage it in the same way because they don't believe innovation is part of their job title. I invited, I won't name names, a CEO of a very large agency to our demo day, and that person said, oh no, innovation isn't what I do, I'll pass it down my organisation. Now, obviously, they're busy people, so I wasn't expecting them necessarily to come, but that was the response. Innovation isn't in my job title. I'll pass it to the person who does that.
At the same time, there is a thing here about getting beyond the lip service, isn't there, and landing it. So I mean, for me, I think we've got a couple of minutes. Great, okay, good. 1 minute? Not 1 minute? Stop now. Okay. Okay. So I think we've learned several things about the tensions in this space. We've heard from a number of different representatives from key areas right across this interface between startups, agencies, and brands. I'm sorry we don't have time for questions. We are being taken off air. We've been too clever and too controversial. And but no doubt the panelists and of course myself will be around to speak to you afterwards if you want. So if I could I ask you to give a big round of applause to Rose, Christina, Emily, and of course to me. Thank you.
Thanks, Michael.